Immigration can be a very divisive issue. It's difficult for us to talk about with those with whom we disagree. We often avoid such conversations, retreating to our echo chambers, or we engage in one another in ways that aren't productive, such as just blasting another person online. How we handle disagreements often separates us. Sometimes it separates us from those we love. Sometimes it separates us from those we don't even know. Sometimes it separates from others because the conflict gets too hot and we say something we regret or that hurts another. But oftentimes, it separates us from others because we don't even engage the conflict in the first place. Conversations in the face of conflict are consequential, and not just because the issues that are at stake matter greatly. They're also consequential because such conversations and the ways we engage them shape the world that we occupy. They shape us. Such conversations are also opportunities. Conversations, especially in the face of conflict, can be an important mechanism through which God works in us to make us holy, and can also be a context in which we can bring about God's kingdom. We're changed through our relationships and our conversations, and not just through relationships and conversations with those who are easy for us to love. It is through difficult conversations and through relationships with those who are most difficult for us to love, such as a person you might find irritating or a person with whom you vehemently disagree. It is those relationships and conversations that offer us the best opportunities to develop the fruits of the Spirit. Being loving, patient, kind, and forbearing, all qualities God asks of us, are challenging for sure, but they're easier to practice with someone you like or agree with than with someone you disagree with. Practicing unconditional love, after all, requires a context within which there are conditions that make it hard to love. Divisive issues provide us with such opportunities. When we engage in difficult conversations across political or ideological lines, we often approach them as debates. In the next few minutes, I will suggest dialogue as an alternative to debate for approaching such consequential conversations. I will first introduce the differences between debate and dialogue, and then I'll discuss some principles and practices for enacting dialogue. First, let's consider what it looks like when we approach conflict situations as debates. First, debate focuses on persuading the other by advocating for our own positions. Debate tends to frame conversation as competitive and sees conflict as a win-lose proposition. Conflict becomes a choice between options. It becomes a zero-sum game. The goal of debate is to win by persuading the other of our position or our point of view. While we can certainly seek to love others well as we engage in debate, and while there are certainly moments when debate is useful, I want to suggest that dialogue provides us with unique opportunities to practice humility, generosity, and patience with those with whom we disagree. I also want to suggest that it's really useful for us at this political moment. So let's consider how dialogue differs from debate. Dialogue focuses on understanding others. The focus is on exploring ideas and the assumptions behind them, both the ideas of someone else, but also your own ideas. Dialogue frames conversations not as competitive, but as collaborative. Dialogue emphasizes conversation as a mutual exchange, and through dialogue we work together to better understand the issue and one another. This is a shared task that we commit to together. Dialogue sees conflict as a win-win opportunity. It's an opportunity not only to build the relationship, but it's also an opportunity to come up with creative solutions. Dialogue assumes we don't both have all the answers, and that we both have legitimate concerns and legitimate needs, and that we can figure out some creative ways forward if we explore those together. Dialogue has several goals. An important goal of dialogue is learning about the issues, learning about the other's perspective, and even learning about our own perspectives. Secondly, dialogue seeks to develop mutual understanding. We aim to discover common ground, and in the way, we also build our relationship. Dialogue sees conflict as an opportunity to build rather than undermine relationships. Research shows that when we address conflict in productive ways in close relationships, it builds our relationship because it cultivates trust and strengthens commitment. Finally, dialogue seeks to generate creative, mutually beneficial solutions or possibilities. In dialogue, we can explore possibilities for productive action together that we couldn't have come up with separately. As you're probably starting to sense, dialogue values going slow. and asks us to think long-term. It requires a commitment to engage in democratic processes for their own sake, not simply to attain power or to promote our own policies. Dialogue is a crucial process for the flourishing of democracy, and it's one that we need to recover in our current political climate. Dialogue probably sounds pretty different from what you're used to. So what does it look like? First, enacting dialogue requires a posture of humility. It requires us to be open to the other, making room to learn something through the conversation. This means that we need to acknowledge the humanity of the other and the complexity and nuance of their ideas. When you encounter someone espousing an idea with which you disagree, it is helpful to ask yourself, what if I were to assume they were acting reasonably? Don't just dismiss their views as irrational. Instead, seek to understand what makes their point of view plausible. Why do they see it in that way? What assumptions about the world underlie their position? Such perspective taking doesn't require you to adopt their views, but it will build empathy and understanding. It also allows you to explore together the assumptions behind their ideas. Second, enacting dialogue requires a spirit that balances inquiry and advocacy. We approach dialogue with genuine curiosity and a desire to better understand the other as well as their ideas. This means we need to seek to suspend judgment, not forever, but for a while. It doesn't discount advocacy altogether or evaluating ideas, but it does say that first we need to be curious, we need to understand, we need to be open to learning before we evaluate and advocate. Third, enacting dialogue requires us to pursue common ground. In such conversation, we seek to pursue shared interests and values. We need to uncover and emphasize, identify together the values and the interests that we have in common. Such common ground then provides a foundation upon which collaborative action can be built. So what kind of communication processes actually make this possible? First, we should seek to use confirming responses. Confirming communication acknowledges the other and demonstrates that we value the other person. We can do this through simply acknowledging them, by showing you support them as a person, even if you disagree with their ideas. We also offer confirming responses by clarifying the ideas of another person, and in general by showing that we take them seriously. You can do so by making eye contact, nodding, using facial expressions, and using minimal verbal encouragers such as, mm-hmm. On the other hand, disconfirming responses reject the other and make them feel inadequate. We often do this simply by ignoring other people. We also do this by interrupting, changing the subject abruptly, talking down to them, responding in a way that fails to acknowledge what they have said or their experiences. Instead, seek to use confirming responses. This doesn't mean voicing inauthentic agreement, and it doesn't mean that you need to agree with their ideas, but you can show respect for them and value what they have to say. Identifying points of agreement, that common ground, those values and interests that you hold in common, are another way to confirm the other. In addition to using confirming responses, a second practice is that we need to learn to listen well. As we listen, we should seek to understand, not simply to make judgments about what we're hearing or to respond to what they're saying. Check yourself to make sure you're not listening reactively by listening only to figure out how best to respond, aka how to undermine their argument. Instead, seek to listen with an open mind and seek to first understand their point of view before evaluating it. How often do you enter a conversation with assuming that you already understand exactly what they believe and why? Listening can help us with this. It can help us to be careful not to dismiss or evaluate others' ideas before fully understanding them. We should listen not only for their ideas, but also for their stories and experiences. We want to understand how their experiences inform their ideas. And we want to listen to discern what they care about and what concerns they have as well. In addition to listening, a third practice is that we should ask good questions. We don't want to ask questions that are simply to interrogate, or questions that have an evaluation or judgment built into them. Instead, we want to ask questions that explore, that help us explore the person's ideas, that ask them to explain their point of view or where it comes from. And a final point about communication practices, make sure you voice your views as well. Make sure you're open and authentic in sharing your experiences. Make sure you remain open to the questions of the other and engage them as well. Dialogue, after all, is a two-way street. It's not a monologue. So be willing to share your perspective and be open to their questions. As I've explained, dialogue offers an alternative to debate for engaging conversations about challenging issues such as immigration. Dialogue helps promote mutual understanding in the face of divisive issues that are crucial for creating a just society. The principles of dialogue can also help us to engage across cultural difference. Dialogue provides us with one way to enter into such consequential conversations so that we might realize the opportunities that they offer. Opportunities to create a world that better reflects God's kingdom, opportunities to build relationships, and opportunities for God to do God's work in our hearts, minds, and mouths. The Refugee and Immigration Collaborative, connecting global neighbors. This collaborative was brought together with support from Calvin College, the Calvin Alumni Association, and the Calvin Center for Christian Scholarship.